Hello there, my name is Sarah and I'm reading a ghost story set in Edinburgh. It's called Secret City by Jan Andrew Henderson and we're up to chapter 10. The Gorodon Wrath. Charlie shut Peasel's diary with a snap. Well, that's that, isn't it? He snorted. They took the treasure and buggered off out of Edinburgh. I might have known we wouldn't be lucky enough to still find it down there. Don't be so sure. Lily tapped the dirty old book. If those guys rose into the sunset with silver, then why was Peasel's diary still in the underground city? Charlie arched an eyebrow. If I had that much money, a stupid diary would be the last thing on my mind. Even if it implicated you to stealing a fortune? Never thought of that. Charlie pointed an appreciative finger at Lily and opened Peasel's diary again. Duncan, Shadow Jack and myself began removing the silver. I would take a piece of armour or sword, carry it to the bottom of the well and put it in the bucket, and Shadow Jack would haul it up, melt it down and beat it into a horseshoe shape. Duncan kept a lookout and fetched food and water, and by this method, working day and night, we quickly transformed all the silver until there were only a few pieces left. Duncan sat on a pile of rags in the doorway of the vault where he and Peasel lived. The chamber was one of the last in this particular tunnel and an ideal place to keep watch to see if anyone walked past. Heading for the hidden staircase, the Highlander didn't know why he was bothering. In the week they'd both been working, not one person had shown the slightest interest in going in the direction of the blacksmith's vault. The combination of superstition and the undetectable fear of an antisocial giant like Shadow Jack Henry had effectively dampened the curiosity of the underground city dwellers. Even the likes of Mary Andrew stayed away. Today was the last day of their enterprise. The armour and weapons were almost all gone, and a huge pile of dirt-covered horseshoes were now piled in the corner of Shadow Jack's chamber. The blacksmith had used all his savings to purchase a horse and cart, which was now tethered in stables at the Pleasance, a few hundred yards away. At dusk, the trio would transport the booty to the surface, load it onto the cart, and drive it through the city gates, claiming it was a delivery for the cavalry at Ruthven Barracks. Once they were out of Edinburgh, they would turn and head for Glasgow, where crooked merchants would pay a fortune for such an amount of pure silver. And it certainly was pure. In fact, it was the most beautiful material that Duncan had ever seen. Tomorrow, he would be a rich man. In a few days, he and Peasel would take their share, and he would have the money to buy a plot of land in the Highlands, perhaps even enough to travel the world. Yet, he wasn't happy. Everything had to be done in secret, for how could three peasants like him, Peasel and Shadow Jack, claim to have honestly come by such wealth? He would have to leave Edinburgh without telling anyone and adopt another identity to buy his farm, and he would never see Heather again. He couldn't bear to spend his life slaving in some Edinburgh factory, but what was the use of having one's own land if you couldn't use your own name and when you had no family or loved ones to share your riches with? And why shouldn't he take someone? In fact, why couldn't he take Heather? He'd always felt he had nothing to offer such a beautiful and talented girl, but now he would have enough money for both of them to live comfortably, and surely she must be tired of singing for a living in those cramped and filthy streets. She claimed to be a gypsy after all, so she must share his love of open skies and uncluttered spaces. He could take her away, look after her properly. His mind was made up. He hurried out of the underground city to find Heather, leaving Shadow Jack and Peasel working unawares in the darkness below. Shadow Jack put on a thick leather gloves and grasped the sides of the giant smelting dish. It bubbled above the forge, hooked onto a metal pole suspended between two wooden tripods. The blacksmith carefully tipped the container until a small amount of molten silver trickled into the curved stone mould on the vault floor. When it began to harden, he plucked the silver from the mould with iron tongs and hammered it into a proper horseshoe. Sparks drifted through the air and singed the smith's beard, but he was used to this and he paid no heed. Like Duncan, he was deep in thought. It was a shame to have to split all this lovely treasure with the boys. Then again, he had to admit that Peasel and Duncan had worked hard, and he certainly couldn't have pulled the job off without them, and besides, that boy Duncan was a tough character, and Peasel certainly wasn't stupid. It was only money after all. He just needed enough to get to America, find some unclaimed land and open his own smithy there, for that was the work he loved. Shadow Jack held up the finished horseshoe, swept it through a pile of soot and dirt, and plunged it into the bucket of water, causing a mighty blast of steam to rise into the air. Peasel sat at the bottom of the rock pile, trying to draw a proper lungful of air. In the last few days, his breathing had become more and more laboured, and now bouts of coughing racked his frail body. The boy's health was rapidly becoming worse, and he suspected that he had consumption, but he had to keep going until he had his share of the treasure. Because he couldn't afford real medical treatment. Thank goodness there were only a couple of pieces left. He struggled to his feet, but another fit of coughing forced him back to his knees. He wiped the back of his hand across his trembling mouth, and then it came away smeared red. The pickpocket clenched his fists, gritting his bloody teeth, and forced himself to stand. Still coughing, he picked up a helmet and with a breathless sob staggered back into the tunnel. Heather was singing at the bottom of Blair Street, as she always seemed to be. It occurred to Duncan that for a gypsy, she seemed remarkably fond of staying in one spot. She saw him, and he came down the hill and quickly finished her song, waving goodbye to the clapping gents as she ran over. She gave Duncan a hug, standing on tiptoe to get her arms around his neck. "Hey, stranger," she said breathlessly. "I haven't seen you all week." "Work, work, work, that's me," the Highlander replied solemnly. He motioned for the girl to sit next to him. "Heather, I think we need to talk." "I thought you were ignoring me." Heather grinned and sat down. "Why so serious?" "Oh, I forgot you're always serious." The Highlander smiled at the mild rebuke and took her hand. "What would you do if you had enough money to get out of Edinburgh?" he said. "I don't have enough money, that is. Suppose I got it. I've lived too long in this city to make wishes. I might be on to something." Duncan ran a hand through his long dark hair, unsure of how to finish. "Something that will make me, well, awfully rich." "What are you talking about? Have you broken the law? Are you in trouble?" "Oh, for goodness sake," the Highlander thumped a hand in his knee. "Have I been a plain speaker? I didn't ken any other way. Me and Peasel found treasure, a lot of treasure, at the bottom of the underground city, under an old well. Well, we've almost finished taking it out, and there's enough to make all of us." His voice trailed away. What's wrong?" Heather's face had gone white. "Treasure." She put a trembling hand on the Highlander's knee. "At the bottom of a well. Incredible, isn't it?" "Is it silver? Weapons and armour made of silver?" "Aye, silver." The Highlander's delight turned to puzzlement. "Wait a minute. How did you ken that?" "Duncan, I think we need to talk." Shadow Jack saw the rope suspended over the well jerk several times, a sign that Peasel was pulling at the other end. He put down his tongs and walked over the hole. "How many more, lad?" he shouted down. "I've tied a helmet to the rope. You can pull it up now." Peasel's voice drifted up. Sounded exhausted. "There's only a shield left, but it's bigger than all the other pieces." There was a fit of coughing from the darkness. "I don't know that I can carry it, Shadow Jack. It looks awful heavy." "Go back to the rockfall and have a rest, wee man," Shadow Jack shouted back. "I'll melt the helmet, then climb down and help you." "Will do." The helmet clanked back and forth against the sides of the shaft as the blacksmith pulled it up. When it reached the top, he leant over the well and untied it from the rope. As he finished unfastening the rope, a blast of cold air hit him, rising from the black depths. Shadow Jack shivered violently and dropped the helmet, then peered into the hole bemused. He'd been working in this vault, hauling water and then bits of armour into the shaft for 3 long months, and he'd never felt slightly cold before. Now, for some reason, the hairs were standing up on the back of his neck, and his callous skin was covered in goosebumps. Peasel trudged back to the rock pile and lowered himself onto the floor. It seemed chillier down here than it had ever been before. He set his aching back against a boulder, stretching and twisting to try and relieve the pain in his tired muscles. He picked up a little flask of whisky that Shadowjack had given him and took a sip. Ugh! Ugh! He shuddered and put it down quickly. I can't believe people drink this stuff for fun. But he had to admit Shadowjack's medicine had warmed him a little, and after a while his neck bent and he closed his eyes. Suddenly there was a sharp noise to his left. His head jerked up. A small stone tumbled down the rock pile, landed a few feet away. Peasel sighed in relief, unclenching his fists. Oh, I will be so happy when I get out of this place, he wheezed, sinking back. My imagination is starting to get the better of me. But for some reason that he couldn't quite fathom, the pickpocket did not dare close his eyes again. We gypsies know many legends, Duncan. Heather looked at the Highlander straight in the eye. And to be honest, some are just make-believe, but others we don't take lightly. It's the same in the Highlands, Duncan agreed. What of it? There is a legend, she continued in whispered tones, that I think that you should hear about. According to the gypsies, many centuries ago, one of the little people was a great magician called Gorodin, exiled from Garhadria for a reason I do not know. His heart was filled with bitterness, and he decided that if he could not live on his own land, he would set up a kingdom on earth. Lily pointed to the hill, always ominously present over Edinburgh's rooftops. In a great cavern under Arthur's seat, he created an army of goblins and trolls called the Gorodin Wrath, and favoured them with magical artefacts, including a cup that bestowed eternal life on anyone who drank from it. They terrorised the humans who lived in the area, and though the little people disapproved of what Gorodin was doing, they did nothing, for magical creatures do not fight each other. Why not? Asked Duncan sourly. We humans don't have a problem killing our own. I only know that this is the rule of the little people, and they dare not break. We must not fight each other, she shrugged cynically. And even if that rule did not exist, Garhadrians care only for music, dancing and merriment. They do not care much about men. But Gorodin had a daughter who could not bear to see the evil done by one of her own kin. When a Scots army gathered to fight the Gorodin Wrath, she led them to a hidden cache of fairy silver, knowing full well that fairy silver was deadly to the dark creatures. The Scots forged it into weapons and armour, including one magnificent sword, Excalibur, which was given to the Scottish leader, Arturius. Excalibur? Arturius? Duncan interrupted. You mean King Arthur? I thought King Arthur was just a legend. It's legends that we are speaking of, Heather said. You must decide whether this one is true. Duncan nodded solemnly, and the girl continued. Some of the Scots led a night raid on the Gorodin Wrath stronghold and stole the magic artefacts. When the Gorodin Wrath, led by the mighty warrior chief Mordred, gave chase, they were met by Arturius and the rest of his warriors. Gorodin's army could not harm those Scots who wore silver armour and could themselves be killed by warriors wielding weapons made from fairy silver. Even so, there was not nearly enough silver to go round, and few Scots were properly protected, so the battle raged all night until only a handful of fighters were alive on both sides. As dawn broke, the Gorodin Wrath fled into the tunnel leading to the cavern under Arthur's seat. Arturius, though mortally wounded, led his few remaining men into the mountain after the creatures. They sealed the entrance to the cavern with rocks and placed their silver weapons and armour in front as a barrier to stop the Gorodin Wrath ever getting out. Even Excalibur was left in there. The Scots melted down a few pieces of fairy silver and set them in a stout door further up the tunnel, and as a final precaution, they erected a fort at the tunnel entrance to always be ready if the Gorodin Wrath got out. The fort eventually became Edinburgh Castle, and the hill under which Gorodin's army was trapped was named Arthur's Seat. Lily indicated the slope in the distance. Gorodin vanished into the remote north and left his minions to their terrible fate. What happened to the magic artefacts? The Highlander said. What happened to the girl? Nobody remembers, Heather said simply. It's quite a story. Duncan felt a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. There's more, Heather continued, and you won't like it. No, I get the feeling of Winnie, the Highlander agreed. The Scots also sealed up a nearby well, the only other entrance to the tunnel. Over hundreds of years, the treasure, the tunnel Arthur, and the well drifted into legend, and the city of Edinburgh was built on top of them. Heather bit her lip. If the legend is true, then it's not treasure that you're stealing. It's the bars of an ancient prison. She held out a hand. Duncan, I'm sorry. But Duncan was already on his feet and running towards the underground city. Oh my goodness. What have they let out? Oh, good grief. Anyway, clean your teeth, guys. Keep washing your hands. And give yourself a great big huge cuddle before you go to sleep. I'll be back tomorrow for the next chapter. Night night.